Marie.strang, she is one of our regulars, and she is a financial advisor with Edward Jones, serving clients throughout the Black Hills. She has been an active member of the South Dakota National Guard for over 20 years. She holds a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology and a Master's of Business Administration. She has lived in Rapid City for 10 years. She enjoys camping, running, snowboarding, and spending time with family. She has completed over 40 marathons, half marathons, and 5 ultra marathons. She is married and has 2 children, Ashlyn and Esther, and 3 dogs, Esther, Zeus, and Cosmo in heaven. With that, I give you Marie.strang.
Can you hear me? Okay, so I think the last time I was this nervous was like my wedding. And both times maybe I considered bolting, but we're gonna get through this. So I'm Marie, I'm with Edward Jones, a financial services firm, but today I really just wanted to talk to you about my journey to Edward Jones. And it's not so much my journey as it is my parents' journey. You can see there, I grew up in the bursting metropolis of Ethan, South Dakota, 330 people. When I lived there, it was 315. And my parents owned and operated a bar, restaurant, catering business right there on Main Street for well over 20 years. But as a lot of small town South Dakota towns die, their business died with it. In about 1995, 96, our business was dead. And we were virtually so poor that by the end of the week, my mom had a part-time job, by the end of the week, all that was left for food in our house was bread and peanut butter. So we were definitely struggling. And I vowed, I'm pretty sure I vowed I would never be like my parents. I would never be self-employed, and I would never own my own business. So I had to go to college, and the only way for me to go to college was to join the National Guard. So in 1998, I enlisted in the South Dakota National Guard. I attended USC and pursued a bachelor's degree. In 2003, I returned home to Ethan because apparently I had no plan for what to do after college. And that was my first exposure to working full-time for the South Dakota National Guard. And it just so happened that life was going to change dramatically for me within that first year of being out of college. January 1st, 2004, my dad passed away at the age of 56, very unexpectedly. My parents were separated, but my mom was already planning to move to Florida. So I'm 24 years old, I'm alone, I'm a college graduate with debt, and I have to figure things out for myself. So the National Guard really was my tool. But I wanted to use this degree that I paid for out of my own pocket, that I'm serving my country for. So I moved to Gillette, Wyoming, where I was a probation and parole officer for 5 years. I specialized in felony addicted offenders, and I was committed and dedicated to helping people change their lives. Turns out, felony addicted offenders do not want help from a 24-year-old. We don't actually know anything. But I really miss South Dakota. It was my home. As much as I maybe thought I was going to end up somewhere fast and amazing, you can take the girl out of South Dakota, but you can't take South Dakota out of the girl. So I moved home, and I should mention that while I was in Gillette, I actually attended officer candidate school for the South Dakota National Guard and earned my commission as a second lieutenant. So I moved home back to South Dakota, went back to work full-time for the National Guard, and it was then that I was presented with the opportunity to run and get paid for it. Yep, run and get paid for it. So I spent the next 8 years working full-time for the National Guard and running races all over the United States. But I held many positions in the National Guard, including 2 company commands, and the position that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, the SCIF manager, which is a top secret facility. I deployed, and I also earned my master's degree this time. But something was kind of missing. You know, I loved running, and the only way I could run and get paid for it, because I'm really not that fast, I'm just stubborn, was to stay in the National Guard and to work full-time for them. Because they sent me to places like Puerto Rico, Kauai, Lincoln, Nebraska, which actually is a really fun place to run. But I thought maybe when I was getting my master's degree that I wanted to own my own business. I wanted to do something every day that I was excited about. And that was really running. I mean, I love the National Guard. I spent a lot of time mobilizing soldiers and seeing the world, but it was still not fulfilling. So I thought, well, what if you open a running store? No. Remember, I told you I vowed never to be like my parents, never to be self-employed, never to own my own business. The National Guard is safe. It pays well, it has benefits. I had a 4-day work week. Everything was perfect, and I had this great job as a skiff manager. And it was a position funded by National Guard Bureau out of Washington, D.C., and I was building and resourcing a facility to process top secret information. And I took that position and moved it further in 8 years than anyone else had before. And that was really my downfall, because at that point, National Guard Bureau came to me and said, congratulations, great job, we can no longer fund you. What do you mean? Well, we can't pay your paycheck. So your state needs to make that a permanent position. Okay, I did lots of research, I coordinated with other states, I presented that information to my leadership, and they agreed with me. We need that position in our state, and we need it to be permanent. You are a temporary employee, you are a GS-11, therefore we cannot offer this position off the street, you are not allowed to apply for it. I literally worked myself out of a government job. Impossible, but I did it. So, okay, I have to find a new job. Well, things were about to get interesting. This is Ashlyn at her high school graduation, and this is me about 10 months later. We were empty nesters for about 8 weeks, and apparently we were really good at it because we found out that we were going to have a baby, and that was not something we were planning on, but it was definitely something that God thought we needed in our lives. So now I am unemployed, basically, or almost unemployed, and I'm pregnant. Every girl's dream at 36. So what are you gonna do? I then, at that point, was kind of recruited by Edward Jones, and I had the opportunity to talk to a local financial advisor, and I really just wanted to be his assistant. I'm like, I just need a job in an office, you know, with air conditioning. I'm gonna be pregnant. Like, this is just, I just need someone to hire me. And he said, I really think you need to be an FA. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a lot of pressure. So he spent time talking to me about his experience with Edward Jones and serving clients. And when I walked out of his office, I'm not saying that the pregnancy hormones had anything to do with it, but I was overwhelmed with his sense of commitment to his clients, his excitement for the business, and his passion. He came out of the forest. He was cutting down trees. And 15 years later, he still loved his job. Loved it. And I got in my car and I thought, is there anyone on Camp Rapid that still loves going to work every single day after 15 years? And that's what I was faced with. I was going to continue to apply for full-time National Guard jobs, but I was miserable. And the idea of going back there for the next 15 years, just, it broke my heart. And I couldn't do it. I knew that I needed to make a change, and I decided to take a leap of faith. So I ended up at Edward Jones. This is a more updated family photo at Christmas. Just so you know, we like to do ugly sweater contests at our house. And yes, I won. That is, in fact, a light-up Christmas cat on my sweater. So I love the Guard. It's given me opportunities that I never would have had. And frankly, that's what led me to Jones. It was this FA's wife who introduced me, and everything happens for a reason. But really, I told you that my journey was my parents' journey, that was how I ended up where I am. And I thought my why for Edward Jones was the ability to own my own schedule, have my own office, be my own boss. But it was in October when my mom became very seriously ill that I realized my why. She was 70 years old, working full-time, and when she went into the hospital and basically became unresponsive for many, many months, I had to take over her finances. And I realized that she was working full-time at the age of 70 not because she loved her job, but because she could not afford to retire. Her Social Security was $1,100 a month, and she had a very, very small amount in savings. And I realized that if someone like me, with the skills and the knowledge and the resources and the passion and the compassion for people, had reached out to her 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or even right after my dad died at 56, she would have been 55, her future, her today, would be much different. Maybe she'd still have the health problems, but her ability to step back from work and focus on her health because her finances were in order would be a lot different. And I realized that I now have the ability every single day to find people like my mom or my dad, people who were self-employed, and provide them the knowledge and resources to change the course of their life. They don't have to end up like my mom. So with that, that's my why. That's why I do what I do. I love it. I'm excited about it. And hopefully on 1 January, I'm actually going to retire from the South Dakota National Guard. And then I'll just run for free, apparently, for the t-shirts and the medals. So.
Okay, so let's give it up for Marie. And I'm just going to remind you, this is the guppy tank, not the shark tank. So any questions that she asks is fair game, anything from the running to her self-care to marketing strategies, anything like that. However, Marie does have a few limitations, and if you ask a question about, hey, what stock to buy, she'll tell you to come talk to her afterwards. So if you have questions like that, those would be good questions to ask afterwards. So with that, we do have mics going as well. So when you ask your questions, please state your name and your business again, just so we can continue to keep faces with names in our audience. So who has the first question for Marie?
Marie.strang. My name is J.D. Henderson with the Wrangler Construction Company here in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Hi, J.D. Henderson.
Hi, it's very good to meet you. Thank you for your presentation today. This young man right here does very similar work to you, and this old man right here has also done some very similar work. So tell us a little bit, it's not an easy industry to kind of get started from scratch, so what has been some of the biggest hurdles towards getting going? You got the passion, you got the drive, what have been some of the obstacles?
The number one obstacle for me personally, and it has nothing to do with the profession, is really just managing my National Guard schedule with initially having a newborn. So I had 6 weeks of maternity leave, and I was taking my daughter to daycare, and I was off to Kansas City for a week. That perpetual tiredness that comes with being a parent was not something I was equipped to deal with. It's absolutely the balancing, because I am a performance-driven individual. I think that's why I'm successful at running. I think that's why I'm successful in the National Guard. I wasn't prepared for how much time having a family takes. That was gonna force me to step away from my business. With that being said, I'm probably more successful than some of my peers who are newer in the field, because I have to be super effective and efficient with my time. So and there are times where I have taken Esther out with me face to face to meet people, because, I mean, can we go back? Like, who doesn't love that face? You are so not going to be rude to me if she is by my side. Just saying. I'm not above that. But I haven't identified any professional hurdles. I enjoy meeting people, I enjoy talking with people, and if I'm a good fit for them and they're a good fit for me, we'll end up working together. But it's really been having a family, if I'm going to be completely honest.
So I have a question, Marie. I'm Leah with Nsight Partners. Why Edward Jones? Why not like A.G. Edwards or Independent Model? Or there are a lot lot of choices, so what drew you to Edward Jones?
Thank you for that question. There are a lot of different firms, and I had actually interviewed with a competing firm right after I got my master's degree. And when I researched the Jones business model and how they expect you to build your business, which is literally going door to door, and who their focus was as the ideal client, the serious long-term investor, and that the training and resources behind the firm was really the safety net for owning your own business without having to handle all of the things like compliance and legal and estate planning. I have all those right behind me. You know, they are my team, they're my support system. Edward Jones was founded, you know, by Edward Jones in 1922, and he built that company by going door to door to ranchers and farmers. And I really like that. I've spent a lot of years in Ethan, South Dakota going door to door selling poppies for the American Legion and band candy to be able to go over to Sioux Falls to see the symphony. And I liked the conservative nature of the firm, if I'm going to be honest. I appreciated the fact that they always respected it's the individual's money, not the advisor's money. And that was why I chose Edward Jones. And we're still employee owned. And I liked the idea that at some point I could be a partner in that firm, that I will always have the ability to own my own business.
I'm calling Raven New Green Latin Hunter. It sounds like there was really a lot of emotion connected to your ability to jump into entrepreneurship. You know, in just recognizing what kind of poverty you actually came out of. How did you get through, or was there even a fear factor for really getting into it? How did you overcome that?
The fear factor is absolutely real because, I mean, we know it's very hard to get fired from the National Guard or from the military. We know that it's very hard to get fired from really any government job. And I think overcoming that fear, I still work on a day-to-day basis. That's what motivates me to go into work every day and meet new people and work with individuals. The safety net still is that MD position that I hold in the National Guard. And maybe I'm almost there. I'm gonna let that go in January, taking on some additional leadership roles within the firm. And that's gonna be, you know, that I'm drinking that Kool-Aid 100%. The only way I can be successful is to give it more than 100%.
MJ for you, non-military, is a part-time soldier, weekend warrior.
Mm-hmm. Never ends up being that, but that's what we call it.
Susan Geisel, I'm in transition. Can you share a little bit about how you used your degree in organizational development and psychology at the Guard?
Well, then I'd be giving away all my top secret information, wouldn't I? So what I loved about industry and organizational psychology was really how teams work together and the different roles that people play on a team or in an organization, and how industries and groups can be more efficient and effective. And that really lends itself to strategic planning. So some of the basic knowledge that I learned in my bachelor's degree, I was actually able to grow through the Baldrige criteria and some of the different things that Mitch Nightingale does, and facilitate teamwork. I think if you polled the National Guard, all my leaders would say she's probably not a very good team player, but when I leave a position, they usually say, man, I wish Marie was still here. So I'm constantly challenging those on my team, those that I work with, to do better, and I think that's that organizational industrial background. Just knowing that there's something that each member on that team can provide, and we have to sometimes challenge people to bring that out in them, because they may not recognize that they have that strength to offer.
Okay, Maria, I have a question for you. So, You've had to make some big decisions along the way. Can you tell us about your decision-making processes and what motivates you to make those decisions?
Yeah, so if we had to recap my major decisions, right? Going to college, joining the Guard, having a baby, though I don't think I had much choice in that. Leaving my full-time. I think I made all my major decisions in about 3 seconds or less, literally. I joined the National Guard because a friend of mine called me up and said, I have to go see my recruiter, I'm scared, can you come with me? I'm like, you already joined, what's there to be scared about? So I walked in and he had the paperwork all signed, spread out, and just said, well, if you sign here, you can leave in January with Roxy and you'll go to basic training together. Okay. I left for MEPS 10 days later and was gone to basic training less than a month later. OCS, that's a pretty big decision because that's about an 18-month commitment just for the training, not to mention the additional schooling of about 6 months. That was a group of all the soldiers who had bachelor's degrees standing around and someone saying, who wants to go to OCS? I looked at the people next to me, you want to go? Yeah, we'll go. All right, I'll go. You know who was left when the class started? Just me. Everyone else had bailed. I think if it's a big decision, while I like to think that I weigh the pros and cons, even with Edward Jones, I really trust my gut. My intuition has never led me wrong. Obviously, I didn't grow up in an environment that was traditional, so to speak, and I have no reason not to think that my common sense and my gut reaction are correct, and they have never led me wrong.
Susan Kaiselgan, since you are an avid runner, what is your favorite running shoe?
I wear Newton, which is a U.S. company based out of Boulder, Colorado, based off the action-reaction technology that Isaac Newton developed. And I've been running in those shoes since 2010. When I turned 30, that's when I found that running shoe, and I've loved it ever since. I do use a different brand for trail running that's called On, that's a Swiss brand. That has a pretty interesting story. That gentleman developed his running shoe using a garden hose, and he chopped garden hose into about 1 inch or 2 inch cylinders and glued them or stapled them to the bottom of his running shoe, and he really liked that cushioning, but obviously they don't stay on, so he developed a shoe based off stapling running hoses to, or water hoses to a shoe, but I can really geek out on running, so be careful what you ask.
J.D. Henderson, in a brief sidebar one day, you and I talked about the lack of experience of cold calling when it comes to this industry. Do you cold call, and what are your primary ways of attracting and meeting potential clients?
Great question. No, I do not cold call. With a caveat, if you're someone that I know, being like the National Guard or the federal technician system, and you've just retired, I may reach out to you out of the blue and invite you to coffee just to see what's going on and reconnect. That's about as cold as I get. I primarily build my business still through face-to-face contacts, literally going door to door. Most people would be completely freaked out by that, but it's actually one of my favorite activities. I have met some wonderful people. Just Monday, I was invited into an 80-year-old woman's house. She's getting ready to sell, but she was telling me the story of how she was a French refugee back during World War II, and some of the pieces that her stepmom had left her, and she wanted me to see these antiques. And I love antiques, I love old stuff. And that was an amazing conversation of about 20 minutes on a doorstep. I've also met a Medal of Honor recipient and visited with him and his wife. They met in the chapel at the VA while both of their spouses were passing away. Those are just connections that I can't get through referrals or BNI. And actually those people may never become clients, but those are conversations I'll never forget. So it's still one of my favorite ways to build my business and find new clients.
Marie, being
from my small town myself, only population 4. I understand how the networking and the South Dakota values really play into getting to know people and developing that network. How do you think being from a small town helped you to where you are today?
Ooh, I like that question. Well, I mentioned selling band candy, so that eliminated my fear of going door to door. I think being in a small town, growing up where you could ride your bike till the street lights came on and everyone knew who you were and everyone knew who your parents were, and if you got in trouble, your parents found out about it before you even got home, has been something that I carried with me whenever I'm interacting with the public. Because your actions speak louder than words. I didn't always get it right. I mean, I was 20 and in college, I didn't always get it right. But those values of respecting others and listening and saying please and thank you that you just have to have in a small town or somebody tattles on you have been invaluable in just speaking with other people. And I'm not a good listener by nature, I don't think. I probably like to hear myself talk more than I like to listen. But, you know, I am aware that other people like to talk too. And I think you hit the nail on the head, that it's probably those small town values that hopefully make me approachable and willing to approach others that I don't know, just to make them feel welcomed or because you're nosy.
So speaking of small town values, because of your experiences of living in a small town and all the way through the National Guard, who now is your targeted marketing? Who do you market towards? Who's your ideal client?
Who's my ideal client? Well, I really said this journey is about my parents. The self-employed would be my core audience. But I also am really drawn to women and service members. I think women are underserved in the financial services industry. We're definitely underrepresented as FAs, and we're underserved. When I knock on doors, there's no statistic, there's no study, but when I knock on a door and the woman answers, "Are you familiar with Edward Jones?" Yes, but my husband handles all our investments. Okay, great. But the woman probably pays the bills. She probably buys the groceries, she probably balances the checkbook, and manages the day-to-day logistics of a household. We all have our roles in a relationship. Some are more traditional than others. That might not always be the case. But because most times for the women that I meet, they've taken on the logistics of the house, including the finances, they leave the financial future to the husband. And I want to close that gap. I want to open up that dialogue and that conversation. And then for women who are working or single longer, they have to take charge of that. We can't leave it to our employers any longer. And then veterans are just a unique population that I can connect with. And my service has been far less of a sacrifice than some others. And this is a way that I can give back to them.
Marie, I have another question. I like to ask every speaker this question. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, financial advisor for Edward Jones, what would you be doing?
Well, if money was no object, sure. Okay, if money was no object and I was suddenly independently wealthy, I would open a running shoe store. 110%, I would talk about running and sell running shoes all day long. Because I wouldn't have to worry about where my paycheck was going to come from, and I could just help people make training plans, and we could run together and go find different trails. That's what I would do. If money was an object and I had to pay my bills and have health insurance, I'm almost positive I would still be working for the National Guard full time, or trying to.
So this is pretty personal, and if you don't want to answer, I don't blame you. In kind of assessing what happened with your parents' entrepreneurial misadventures or adventures, did they ever have financial advice? Did they ever have an advisor? And did they even realize they needed one? And have you been able to, on any levels, provide a safety net, a greater safety net for your mom?
That's a very good question. To my knowledge, and it maybe was something that my mom never talked about with me, but outside of someone coming and speaking with her about the 401k that she had at CHS, no one ever sat down and said, Christine, in order to not work anymore, you're gonna need this much money. Or had the conversation, how much is it gonna cost you to live on a day-to-day basis in retirement? They never had that conversation. And because they were self-employed for really so long, I mean, until their mid-50s, they hadn't paid in a lot to Social Security. So when my mom looked into could she receive my dad's survivor benefit, there was really nothing there. He hadn't paid in enough. Have I been able to help her? Yeah, a little bit. She has limited resources, and we're trying to preserve those as much as possible to keep her in her home. She'll never be able to go back to work. She'll probably never drive again. She suffers from very advanced vascular disease. And ultimately, what happened was she had lack of blood flow to the bowels and was starving to death over the course of maybe 3 to 6 months, lost about 40 pounds. And when we finally diagnosed it, there weren't many doctors that really wanted to attack the advanced nature of her disease because her arteries were so hardened. So they ended up rebuilding the aorta, bypassing down to the femoral arteries and then back up to her stomach. So that requires an extensive stay in ICU. And while she was in ICU, she suffered a stroke in the cerebellum. Now keep in mind, she had a stroke 8 years ago, where they found, about 96% blockage in all major arteries of the heart and in the carotids. And so that stroke or that heart attack resulted in a stroke. So the previous symptoms of the stroke are now present again. And then we have additional symptoms from the stroke in the cerebellum. So her recovery was lengthy. I mean, she went into the hospital in September. She didn't come home until sometime in March of 2019. And at that point, as an only child, you just do what you can to pay your bills so that you can preserve her money. And that was my number one frustration. And if I'm on a tangent, I apologize. But when we looked at, does she qualify for Medicaid? What other resources can she get? She doesn't have any money. I mean, I can tell you she has less than $50,000 in 401k in cash, and that is too much to qualify for Medicaid. As a single person, my mom is single, you can only have access to $2,000. $2,000 before Medicaid will cover the cost of your care or your nursing home. So if she goes into a nursing home and has more than $2,000, we will have to spend all of that to keep her in care, and then Medicaid will kick in, and then typically the facility only allows you to keep about $20 a month. I'm not okay with that. So with that respect, there is only so much that I can do legally, and if you ask a tax professional, I've tried to find every backdoor resource to try and preserve her funds, but some of it's just my husband and I adjusting our budget so we can cover things like groceries and odds and ends, Target, so her money can go to her enjoying her last few years. That was a buzzkill, huh? Somebody asked me about running.
Mike Dupre, Rocket Talks. So the assumption is a financial advisor is super disciplined and money smart. Is that true, or are you guys as confused as the rest of us when it comes to personal finances? And then secondly, is that a skill that you always had, or did you have to learn that when you came on board?
I think it was a skill. I'm going to answer backwards. I think it was a skill I always had. I just didn't have all the knowledge and resources available to really find out that I loved it. I think that there are probably really super smart advisors across the industry that are far more smarter than me about analyzing the market and PE ratios and all this stuff. And I enjoy it, but it doesn't take up the bulk of my time. I have an entire department that provides that information for me, and I am able to explain it on a level that everyone can understand, because that's how I understand it. I know that over time, those skills will continue to improve and I'll get smarter and smarter. Do I know everything? Absolutely not. No person knows everything, even about their own specific profession. And I've actually learned quite a bit from clients, just from various different situations. If they're a tax professional, they lend, their advice in that different scenario as well. I like to think I'm super smart, but gosh, there's so much that I don't know because I just haven't been in the situation. So I value and love the challenging situations and the complex statements or things that come before me when I don't know the answer and I get to spend some time researching it and figuring it out. Did that answer your question?
I don't think it did.
Okay.
So my question was these financial advisors. So in my opinion, maybe I'm way off, but finance can be such a morass of confusion, and I always need more than I have, and I'm always behind. There's always a juggle, and I hold financial advisors on this pedestal. They never get to that position. They're so structured and stringent with their personal budgets. They've got money by the short and curlies. Is that accurate?
No.
And if so, did you go into financial advising already skilled in that discipline, or?
I think I was skilled. I think I had the knowledge for that. I didn't always practice it. No one's perfect. And I think that to put financial advisors up on a pedestal and say that they do great things with their own money is completely inaccurate. They have the ability to regurgitate that information. I have the ability to regurgitate that information. But if I'm completely honest with you, we sometimes overspend every month. I'm human. I have to consciously say someday I would like to buy a new car and I don't want to finance it. I have to put my money away. Well, sometimes I spend that money before I get it put away. So do not feel intimidated by financial advisors because I guarantee you they're not perfect. Some may be better with their money than others. Eventually, hopefully, we all get better with our money as advisors because we have access to literally all the possible information. But I guarantee you we don't always get it right. And if they say they do, they're lying. So, not to blow the lid off financial services, but that's the truth.
It's like the painter with the unpainted house, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the way it goes. Yeah, so this isn't really about my business as it is as much about you folks sitting in the audience who own your own businesses. Don't think that you have to wait till you earn this much money or until your business makes this much money to go talk to someone about the future. Because you may think you love that business and you'll do it forever, but there's gonna come a time when you don't. So it's never too soon. Find someone that you connect with, that you trust, that you can be completely raw and honest with about everything going on in your business and your financial world, and then get their advice and guidance about how to protect yourself for the future. That's my big ask. Even if you're not a business owner and you haven't done that, it's very easy to think that we have enough time. And I'm telling you, my mom probably thought she had more time, and she didn't. So go speak with someone you know and trust that has the appropriate licensing and the resources and the skills. If it's me, great. If it's not me, that is okay too, because it's your finances, it's your future.
Okay, let's give it up for Marie.